So I'm finally up and out, leaving my what can you call it, tumbled down cottage remains of, or it may have been something else, but yeah, as you can see, the weather this morning is pretty dismal. I'll do a quick review of where we're at the moment and put into context in relationship to the three towers. So right far in the distance, directly the way we're looking, is actually Peel Tower, which was obviously kind of tower number one for day one, and we'd actually had travelled from the valley below, in essence, and then up into where Peel Tower is. Come up this up the hill now. In actual fact, the field I'm standing in now is apparently got a bull in it, but I certainly can't see any bulls, so hopeful on that front. But we're now heading over to Jubilee Tower, or Darwen Tower as it's known more locally. So I think that's a better shot of the tower now. Almost looks like it. I always think it looks like a rocket taking off. But you will see when we get there. It's a pretty solid rocket made of good mason stone. Beware. I mean, that's pretty scary a little bit. And then we've got one of the signs of the West Pennine Way. Let's go this way. West Pennine Way. So we're on a bit of a kind of road farm track, probably for about half a mile, maybe at the most. And just as I was walking down, I noticed that somebody was parked their truck overnight, and I thought you might be interested to have a look at said truck. Yep, you can see it's been carefully parked in a little bit of a lay-by. There's just a little bit of a lay-by here, so I think this guy is safe parking his truck here. And in addition, we now have rain again, so it's probably going to be a little while before I think of recording again. Probably still got a mile or so to go, but I can certainly start to see it quite distinctively now. When they were actually deciding to build the tower, they invited the locals to come up with a design, or opened it up for local architects and stonemasons, etc., to come up with a design. And as you will see later on, this is the design they came up with. Did they know they were forming a stone rocket? So in the late 1800s, Darwin Moor would have been initially accessible to the locals. However, what happened in time was that the land came into the ownership of the Reverend William Duckworth, who, knowing that grouse shooting was becoming a thing for most gentlemen to do, he started closing the land. And so the people of Darwin were no longer able to have access to the land. However, a guy called Thomas Ashton, he was the manager of the local coal mine and some of the quarries, and he actually did his trade by travelling across the moors, across the open pathways. And the gameskeeper kept blocking the individual paths, but he kept opening them up, and so obviously he came into conflict with the Reverend. But what he actually did was he took the case to court, and for once he actually, which was quite unusual in that time, he actually got and won the right and have access to the land. So a couple of years later, it was the Queen Victoria's Jubilee, and they wanted a way to celebrate that in Darwin, and so they decided they would actually build Darwen Tower, or as it's sometimes known as Jubilee Tower. However, obviously the locals also wanted to use it as a memory, or a lasting memory, of the fact that they'd gained access to the moors. And so the locals do tend to call it Darwen Tower, whereas when it was originally built, the kind of officials were more for the Jubilee Tower. Great thing about the Reverend, although he was the absent landlord, when it came to building of the tower, he did actually donate all the stone. So he actually used one of the quarries on the land where all the stone was taken from. And so when they came to do the official opening of the tower, it was him who actually was the official opener in terms of taking the key and opening the door to let people in onto the tower. And so it opened up in 1898 in the month of September. So in the distance generally is where we've come from in terms of day one. We've come across the moors in this direction. You can see outlines of the actual path. And so we've now, obviously we're at the top of Darwen Tower. And so this is obviously day 2. But day 3 is essentially going over in that direction. In fact, in the very distance, I can actually see the masts that are on Winter Hill, which is where we're going for day 3. But for the rest of today, we're essentially walking along this path here and heading over towards Tockhole's Information Centre, which we'll see a little bit later. lunch break. So we're alongside a little bit of a stream. I've come off the track, maybe about 50 yards off the track, just to get out the way and set things up. So I'm sat on my trusty seat because it is pretty damp underneath, to say the least. Managed to obviously strip off a bit, which is always helpful, and it's really nice to do after being kind of stoked up in all my gear. Managed to get me bagel out that I'm having for lunch, and I've got my trusty hydration, which I've probably not been having enough of as I've been walking. Been a bit too distracted by taking too much photos and videoing, but anyway, it's quite a nice little spot. It's always a bit of a struggle sometimes to find somewhere out of the wind with a little bit of a view. Usually in July that isn't a problem, but boy, with all this rain we've been having, gosh, I can't believe how bad it really has been. Underfoot is just atrocious. So much mud that I'm having to navigate. Of course, I keep forgetting to look down because I'm looking at where I'm taking photographs and things. So I've had one or two tricky moments, to say the least, but all's good. I'm fighting fit and ready to go. Just have lunch, and then we're off to, well, heading in a sense to our third tower, which is Rivington Tower on Winter Hill, but we've got quite a few miles to do before we actually get to there. We've moved over, as I was saying before, from Darwin Moor, and now we're actually on Anglesark Moor. I'm just on the edges of Anglesark Moor before going up a hill which is referred to as Great Hill. So we're on the track walking away from Great Hill. You might be able to see it just there in the distance. Come to an area called Drinkwater, so I think this is Drinkwater's farm. We have a bench there that's in memory of the chairman of Chorley Rambling Society, and then over here we have another lasting memory. So we are going to White Coppice, which is over in that direction. And once we've hit White Coppice, we will be then heading over in that kind of direction, behind the hill, towards Rivington and Rivington Pike, where the tower is. So after walking around for probably a good 3/4 of an hour, I think I finally found a spot to do a bit of a wild camp on. As you can see, folks, it's getting pretty dark now. 9:30 at night. Hey, the nights are rolling in. Had my food, my soup and expedition food, calorie condensed apparently, and now I need to get into my warm sleeping bag, curl up in the tent, and get some sleep so I can be up early and away before the crowd start to gather on the footpaths again. Seen the weather forecast for tomorrow. It's rain, more rain, then some more rain, and then apparently we're having thunderstorms. I'm hoping I can get back and get the job done and get home before then. So I'll be scooting along hopefully, but nonetheless I'll still stop and tell a few stories and have a look at the history of the place. See you in the morning. Good night.